So this YouTuber named Nando V Movies likes to do these things where he makes people far more relevant and important than me talk about scenes relating to a certain theme. Marvel Cinematic Universe, X-Men, and now the vague concept of villains. One villain is seen, and Biffweed's stupid face has managed to drag me into this. Originally I had a video completed about Gilgamesh from Fate Zero, defending his character, discussing the subtleties of the interactions in the Three Kings scene and the implications of his usage of Enemy Leash in the Ione Heteroi. And then a shitload of copyright bullshit related hit, and I'm not dropping a video with 75% of it is covered by an American president with absolutely no relation to my homeland of Australia. So instead I'm going to focus on one of my favorite villains from my favorite franchise of all time, Starscream, from Transformers Armada, Energon, and Cybertron. I want to discuss the rise, fall, and middling finale to a great character across three completely distinct series where he basically has no relation to himself across them. And yeah, I know it's called One Villainous Scene, but I don't think one scene is going to paint the picture of this character very well, so I think an overview is necessary. Let's go. Introducing Transformers Armada, a series about the heroic Autobots and evil Decepticons collecting minicons, tiny little guys that if I had less stands I would have compared to Pokemon in a dumb reference a moment ago, who power them up through retroactive science magic of a cosmic ubermensch robot god manlet. The series is iconic for its rushed animation, awful dubbing translations and errors, and general poor production values. But amongst all that is one character who managed to shine all the way through, paving the way even for the Unicron battles, an era of the series often lauded as a huge improvement overall. Starscream was a character initially with very little going on, and barely any resemblance to his original incarnation, a commonality during this era of Transformers when only Optimus Prime and Megatron would remain consistent between incarnations. In this series, Starscream was written as a proud warrior, who over time had constant failures, criticisms from his leader, and constant inability to succeed on the battlefield build up and sow the feelings of self-doubt and lack of belonging that were core to his character and arc. At first blaming his lack of a minicon, even after acquiring his partner Swindle and gaining the Null laser cannons, he still found himself woefully inadequate in the eyes of Megatron. Later acquiring the Starsaber sword, his performance improved, but what ended up destroying his newfound confidence was, once again, Megatron. As always, nobody trusted Starscream, and Megatron manipulated events as to make Starscream unable to trust himself, thinking he nearly killed his own teammate. Later on, however, Megatron seemed to put some faith in Starscream, giving him back the Starsaber and sending him off to headline an attack on the Autobots. But it was all bullshit. Abandoned, left alone, wreaking havoc in a single fight against Optimus Prime, the words of the Autobot leader wormed their way into his head, deactivating the minicons he fought with. Starscream cried out for help, calling for his allies to come assist him, but no allies came. Using him as nothing more than a pawn for their scheme, the Decepticons had attacked the Autobot base and claimed a weapon of immeasurable power, using Starscream as really just a decoy to lure the Autobots away. This was the turning point for Starscream. He overheard the Decepticons deriding him at their base, wishing to take the Starsaber from him once again. Wielding the blade, he went on a rampage through the Decepticon headquarters, running out and flying to the Autobots to seek asylum on their side. It was here Starscream found a new group of allies, but as time went on, he found he didn't quite feel like he belonged there either. Aside from his new leader Optimus Prime, the Autobots were quick to doubt his intentions and character. Misunderstandings born from the words of their human allies, miscommunication on what happened to certain minicons, and a conflict of goals in invading the Decepticon base. Starscream knew that he had no place amongst the Autobots. Though the humans remained his friends and he looked up to Optimus as a leader of integrity, he couldn't fulfill his goal with them, betraying the Autobots to join the Decepticons once more in the hopes of killing Megatron from within his own army. But before he could enact such plans, the monster planet Unicron awakened, a threat too potent for any one faction to face alone. As the battles waged on, Starscream himself receiving an upgrade from his minicon, Starscream found himself with no other option during a battle between Optimus Prime and Megatron. Knowing they had to ally to face Unicron, and knowing Megatron, now Galvatron, would never listen to simple words, refusing to acknowledge Unicron even existed, Starscream made one final act of betrayal, facing Galvatron in battle and proving his worth as a warrior at last. But in the final moments of the battle, Starscream held back his final blow, allowing himself to be run through by Galvatron's blade. Unable to break his oath, he simply told Galvatron of his folly. The soldier let Galvatron know of his reasons. No matter what he did, Starscream never gained his respect, which led to this moment. Starscream, straining to move, the blade that symbolized his fighting ability run through his torso, and his body pushing itself to make one last act of desperation. One final act, one final betrayal, one last attack from a soldier who fought with honor and was never truly evil in spite of his allegiances. He tore out the Starsaber with his bare hands and fired a final blast from his cannons, ejecting his minicon as to not allow him to die with him. Unicron responded with a blast of lightning that disintegrated Starscream before Galvatron's eyes, Starscream's attack never even reaching Unicron's form. In the final moments, Starscream convinced Galvatron to finally do as he said, to join forces with Optimus and face the threat of Unicron together. In his final act, Starscream gained that respect he sought, and was the catalyst of the Transformers' final battle with Unicron. From Decepticon soldier, to Autobot outcast, to traitorous loner, to proud warrior. The story of Armada Starscream resonates as one of the most well-written and interesting versions of any character throughout the Transformers franchise, and arguably the best written take on Starscream we've ever gotten. And then Energon happened. Not to beat the dead horse that Energon is, Starscream was brought back to life by the alien Alpha Quintesson, made into a puppet for him, then a puppet for Megatron, and then when Megatron killed himself in a star, Starscream decided to do so too. Yeah, what happened to Starscream after Armada is far from the happiest tale, being little more than a literal ghost of his former self, stripped away of his identity. I wouldn't even mind it so much if Megatron ever thought back to these moments, and if he changed Starscream on purpose because he was afraid of losing Starscream again. It would have been such an interesting story if Megatron went into Starscream's mind and purged certain things because he was afraid of losing Starscream, only to realize that what he purged was what made Starscream so useful in the first place. What made him care about Starscream, what made Starscream a valuable warrior. But no, Megatron was also basically a completely different character past his development at the end of Armada. But then we moved to Cybertron, a series that in its original Japanese was never intended to be a follow-on but retroactively became one. In this series, there are basically no references to the past, it's, as expected, completely different, and Starscream played out as rather stereotypical for the character. But what made this version of Starscream somewhat interesting was his drive and dedication. He was a powerful warrior, and pushed all of his limits to achieve his goals, a contrast to Megatron, who almost never looked like he had to try, and refused to accept his losses. Though the story was not told with much nuance, Starscream did have several moments to shine throughout the series, most notably when he single-handedly fought his way through the Autobot ranks to acquire the Omega Lock, the series' key MacGuffin. He gained immense power, turning into a monstrous Transformer several times larger than anyone else, growing so large he once chose to face off against Primus, the god of all Transformers in creation itself. He lost, but it was what happened in his final clash with Galvatron that matters. The two had made it to Gigantium, the giant planet and location of the final Cyber Planet key, the relics they were searching for to activate the Omega Lock. In one final clash, they lectured each other on the nature of power, a battle not just of physical abilities but of their very ideals, the power born from one who risks nothing at all, and the power born from one who sacrifices everything. In their final battle, as Starscream began to take the lead, a clash between their power caused a rupturous explosion, and sent him rocketing into another dimension. A failure, never to be seen again. Then, until Galvatron needed a pep talk, and Starscream told him to stop being such a pussy-ass bitch from across dimensions, making him angry and go be more of an asshole. It's a damn shame Starscream had to return. While Cybertron can get a pass for never having been intended to be a follow-on, Energon feels like a real waste of his character. The biggest scene for Starscream was his death, the finale to his arc, a death that in any other context would have been entirely futile. A final attack that never landed that just led to his immediate death. Not even a corpse left. The only remains being the sword he discarded and the partner he saved. But Starscream's actions throughout the show flash back to Galvatron, the biggest villain of the majority of this series, a bastard who saw the minicons as little more than tools, who only showed the baseline of respect to his soldiers. And Galvatron buried the hatchet and worked with Optimus. The impact Starscream left resonates throughout the series. It drives the actions of Alexis, a human he formed a close friendship with. It motivates Galvatron to join forces with his lifelong rival, even saving his life at one point. And we see in Galvatron's ultimate fantasy of victory, Starscream still stands by his side. In Galvatron's final moments, he willingly sacrifices himself for the betterment of everyone else, to end the conflict that allows Unicron, a being who exists so long as conflict is around, to remain. Starscream was the shining highlight of this series, made all the more spectacular by the shoddy quality of most of what was around him. A good person who swore an oath to a tyrant, a proud warrior who lost his faith in himself, a hero who gave his life to ensure the survival of everyone he cared about. Starscream never got to say goodbye to his closest friends, his allies. Standing before him in his death were but the two leaders he fought under, the one he admired and the one he sought to gain the respect of. But he said all the goodbyes he needed with his final act. To those he cared about, to those he fought against, to those he formed the closest bonds with, his actions spoke louder than his words ever did. And that's the tragedy of the character in Transformers Energon. Always intended as a sequel and directly following his story, there were so many paths that could have been taken. The character could have reunited with Alexis, and their friendship could have reawoken the spark within him. He could have had scenes to talk with fellow survivors of the previous series Cyclonus and Demolishor, where they talk about aspects of him that he doesn't even remember. And they could have worked on his relationship with Hot Rod, Optimus, and Megatron, but they didn't. Starscream remains a character who lived a warrior and died a hero, but one that came back as a puppet and remained a puppet to his death. The only action Starscream took of his own volition in Transformers Energon was to die beside his master Megatron, and that's tragic. For such a great character, having such a characterless end is terrible. And I know there are fans who compare this to the end of Dinobot from Beast Wars Transformers, a character with a very similar story arc, heroic sacrifice with ramifications throughout the series, and who came back as a clone and a puppet. But Dinobot's actions in the final season were all his own, choices that led to his death but also served a greater purpose befitting his character. Starscream never got that, and that's something that disappoints me to this day. Starscream remains a shining example of how to take a character in a new direction while staying true to the core aspects of that character. G1 Starscream and all incarnations aside from the two bad ones revolve around the core theme of treachery, being a traitor to Megatron and wanting to defeat him despite being a Decepticon of high rank himself. Armada Starscream was the first to take this in a new direction in mainstream Transformers media since Generation 1. He still is a traitor, he in fact betrays the faction he's a part of 3 times in the series, but his reasons are completely unique. He doesn't do it selfishly or to gain power, he does it because Starscream started as a Decepticon but was never a bad person. He's shown to care about even his fellow Decepticons like Demolishor, and all he wanted was for his abilities to be respected. But this experience with the Decepticons jaded him and scarred him. It gives him a reputation that despite the Autobots' heroism is something they have trouble looking past. This itself gives the Autobots a bit of depth beyond just being the good guys, the fact that they're still people and have trouble with trusting enemies, with Optimus Prime being the only one who really trusted Starscream aside from the humans. But this lack of trust is something that Starscream just couldn't take. He didn't fit in, he couldn't accomplish his goals here. He betrays them not because he despises them, not because he seeks to gain from betraying them, but because he seeks to gain from being within Megatron's ranks to kill him. And his final act of betrayal is one done selflessly for the betterment of everyone else. Starscream is not a traitor because he's a bad person, he's a traitor because he's a good person. While most Starscreams couldn't fit in the Autobots at any point in their lives, this one could have easily been an Autobot if that was where he was first recruited. If he started as an Autobot, he would have been a perfect fit, but sadly that's just not how it turned out. And Energon's greatest flaw, despite what little did happen with him, because despite how much I rag on it, it's not like nothing happened with him, but what little they did was immediately scraped away when Megatron reprogrammed him. Anyway, the greatest flaw of Energon Starscream is how they didn't really understand that. They could have had this reprogramming focus on Megatron and Starscream's relationship, but they just didn't. Energon didn't understand what made Starscream such a good character. He did what I wish Transformers did more of in modern times, reinventing characters without taking away their core traits. If a character has nothing in common with an established name, don't use the name.
Little lady, no! Oh.
Make them a unique character and an original one, like Clobber or Wild Wheel. But when a character does use an established name, try to take the core aspects of them and do something new with it, like with Armada Starscream. Returning to the classics is not always bad, but neither is reinventing established characters in a new direction, like Starscream or Prime Wheeljack. But as it is, this character is the one villain seen in Transformers Armada that resonates with people and remains a beloved part of the franchise, and forever will. So that was the video. I hope people enjoyed. It kind of sucked having to remake an entire other one, but at least I got to put out something. You can go watch this video on the Deep Sea King from One Punch Man, which I'll link in the description and end card, and also the playlist where people much smarter than me will also have incredible videos on the topic, which I didn't watch many of prior as to not influence my video in any subconscious way, meaning I have quite a backlog of things to catch up on. Wait, hold on, what the fuck am I doing? I had the chance to redo this and make it about Ryuga and I didn't take it. What the fuck am I